A Brief History of Ethics, Key Traits in Ethical Theories. What is ethics? Ethics deals with human well-being and discusses the following: the nature of individual good, the nature of social good, the relation between these, the ethical motives that exist for the individual to pursue social good or to whatever is morally right, the relation between pleasure and good, the nature of virtue in antique ethics, duty and moral obligation in modern ethics, the freedom of will, the ethical worth of positive morality. The following questions will serve to dig into the nature of the problems which ethics attempts to solve. Is happiness the ultimate end of actions? Is virtue preferable to pleasure? How do pleasure and happiness differ? What is meant by saying that I ought to perform some particular action or respect some general precept such as the keeping of promises? Am I under any obligation to seek the welfare of other persons as well as my own? If so, what is the right proportion between the two welfares? What is meant by freedom of the will? Is feeling or reason the right guide to conduct? What do the terms good, right, obligation, duty, conscience signify, both practically or theoretically? The definition of ethics is as follows. Ethics is the science which investigates the general principles for determining the true worth of the ultimate ends of human conduct. Let's now look at the Greek philosophers who gave us our ideas on ethics. Sophocles was against sophists like Gorgias and their egoism. He is the founder of the science of ethics. He believed virtue is knowledge. It may be thought and learned. He who knows must act accordingly. No one voluntarily follows evil. Vice is because of ignorance. Only by self-knowledge can freedom be acquired. Plato was a student of Socrates and the Socratic school of thought. He defined social good and individual good as well as their relationships. The four cardinal virtues belonging to the state: wisdom, fortitude or courage, temperance, and justice. Justice is the highest virtue, and it includes all others. It requires individuality too. Every member of the state should be just. Social and individual goods are defined. Ideal rulers are described for an ideal state. He should be a philosopher, a lover of wisdom, combining intellectual insight with practical intelligence. They should be educated for literature, art, gymnastic, mathematics, so that he will know how to generalize and find the accuracy in details, and tested for fortitude. Chief rulers must be chosen from those who are best qualified in dialectics, or wisdom. Highest good. Absolute good in the form of ideas, ideals, and reason in the universe. He defined mortal body and immortal soul. He defines the good man in whom knowledge, emotion, and desire work perfect harmony, no part of the soul tyrannizing over the rest, each part exercising its due activity. Aristotle believed in the separation of sciences. He defines political science as the highest of all sciences, as everything else aims at the good of the state. Social good is above the individual good, only insofar as individuals make up a society and their actions attain the good of the society. It is the subject of political sciences, or the science of ethics. He defines well-being as the activity of the soul in accordance with virtue during the period of a complete life. He defines the definition of truth and the doctrine of mean. Every kind of excellence or virtue is a mean between two extremes, one an excess and the other a defect. He also put focus on various virtues. The beginning of modern ethics began in year zero, under the influence of stronger moral and spiritual forces of Christianity. The medieval era was Neoplatonists, and then there was two schools of thought, naturalism, or ethical ideas from natural laws, and intuitionism, or ethical ideas and obligations that are intuitive. Descartes said, "Truth is what can be comprehended by man," and Spinoza said, "Truth is its own criterion." Hobbes was the founder of modern ethics, and he was an egoistic naturalist. Hobbes defines philosophy as the knowledge of effects by means of the concepts of their causes. By this, he identifies it with deductive science based on observation and reasoning. For reason, logic is important to seek the cause-to-effect pathways. Hobbes' doctrine is exclusive egoism, ego being the soul. All men, he says, are equal by nature. They possess equal powers of self-defense and similar tastes. Except for specially surprised condition, men are in war with men, or man is the wolf of man. In this state of mind, nothing is right or wrong. Force and fraud are in war with the two cardinal virtues. But when they become rational, then peace comes. Without social harmony, happiness is impossible. Therefore, seek the peace and follow it, for if we cannot get it, we are to defend ourselves at all costs. To attain peace, men will use that much liberty to allow a similar liberty for other men. Immanuel Kant is the most important name in modern ethics. He is a follower of both the intuitionists and the naturalists. He underlines the importance of duty and self-love as two distinct motives. He says that the only absolutely good thing is the good will. It is the principle of action that ought to be obeyed by all rational beings under all circumstances and for its own sake. The principle of action is adopted by the person, and not the laws which are independent of that person. Kantian categorical imperative suggests that a person should act on that principles, and when everybody acts like that principles, become a universal law. Kant's definition of free will is based on the conscientiousness of moral obligations. We ought, therefore we can. Kant based his theory on three postulates of morality: the existence of God, the freedom of will, and the immortality of the soul. The particular duties as well as the general principles of morality can never be doubtful as they are known by rational intuition. He ascertains that we can do what we ought to do, but unless we know what we ought to do, we cannot do it. A conflict of duties is impossible. Motive determines the morality of the actions, not the effects. Kant's most important teaching is, morality of an action depends only on the motive and is independent of the effects on the person doing it or on the others. Utilitarianism is the doctrine that the ethical standard should be great happiness of the greatest number of people. Its founder is Bentham, who is followed with Stuart Mill and Sidgwick. Bentham says that nature has placed man under the governance of two masters, pain and pleasure. It is for them to tell us what we ought to do, therefore we shall do. Then the principle of utility comes into picture. To approve or disapprove every action with a value in itself to increase or decrease the happiness of the party or community whose interest, sum of interests of members of the community, is in question. What is a measure of pleasure and pain? For the personal pleasure, 1, intensity, 2, duration, 3, certainty, 4, propinquity, 5, tendency to be followed by other pleasures, 6, purity, freedom from pain, are the criteria for the measure. For the community, it follows. 7, the extent, the number of persons to share the pleasure. The seventh measure was brought to define the equity by Bentham. In his words, everyone is to count for one and no more for more than one. In conclusion, pure ethical concepts cannot be used unless they are applied to real-life problems. Applied ethics deals with more concrete subjects like the family, profession, state, politics, etc. Therefore, applied ethics cannot altogether be regarded as a distinct science. It is rather the application of science, art, and the other results of human experience intelligently in accordance with the ethical ideal that is adopted. Very few general ethical principles can be used with precision in real life as they cannot take into account the particular conditions. Consequently, there is often uncertainty about the answers to moral problems until we come to a particular case. Although in many cases the borderline between applied and pure ethics is not always visible. However, for securing the social good, how should the special interests of individuals be regulated? This is the fundamental problem of applied ethics. In general, the individual has to use his own judgment to construct his own system of applied ethics. Conscientiousness, the permanent will to be in act in the spirit of the objective ideal in which he believes, is indispensable, but it may mislead, unless guided by reflecting intelligence. The knowledge of pure ethical theory and a brief history of it help arousing its reflection in practical life. Science and research ethics and engineering ethics are parts of the applied ethics to be studied.